Dr. Waje, what lessons do you think Nigeria can actually learn from Indian experience?
Thank you very much. When I was in India in Manso, one of the lessons really you learn is that the exclusivity of knowledge is really not particularly to a country. Knowledge is a patch, as a cell, just like the earth. Each layer has its own characteristics, okay? So Nigeria has their own peculiar characteristics of how to build knowledge, how to incubate knowledge, and how to compete knowledge-wise. Now, you find out that the difference is that while knowledge is abundant elsewhere, you must have people who can groom the critical mass of knowledge and people who can incentivize this knowledge ecosystem. So in India, you found out there are a lot of incentives that are given to knowledge inventors, knowledge entrepreneurs, and all what's not, which of course we have not started to do. That's why CVL is trying to make sure that those leaders who have been in the ICT sectors can be recognized and see how they can now be made to be long-time mentors of those who are going to come after us. So if you now look at, for example, if you ask me, I will turn the NYSC into a knowledge camp.
Well, Dr. Waje, I beg to cut you short there. There's some news just coming in. 2 cases of Ebola virus disease have been confirmed in Port Harcourt. The Minister of Health just confirmed this. That's the doctor's wife and the diplomat who came in contact with late American librarian Patrick Sawyer. Well, that's sad, but I'm sure we'll soon have to contain all of this. Well, sorry to cut you in there. Maybe you have to continue.
So, as we said, if you look at how to accelerate the multiplier effect of this ICT ecosystem, you have abundant knowledge pockets here and there. All what you need to do is to converge them into a center. Like we have the NYSC scheme. Yeah. NYSC scheme is a laudable scheme. It's been there for more than 40 years. But what we are saying, is it not time to turn it around? This pocket of knowledge, of what you say are the best apples that you've plucked from your farm, your knowledge farm, over years. Because each time you graduate people in a year, you recognize they are the best in the country. If you have 120,000 NYSC kids somewhere around there, you can really retool them into ICT entrepreneurs, okay, and extract from the 120,000, just extract about 5,000 who are best, and then give them incentives to be entrepreneurs. Send some of them to schools, because our lecturers, you see lecturers who've not gone to ICT conference for about 15 years. What can he teach in such a sporadic, fast-growing knowledge domain? It's not their fault. So that is a weak link. Who are going to teach our children on how ITC competitiveness is going to happen in the world? So we need to be able to address that. And those will be, the people who will address it will be the leaders and, of course, policymakers who are conscious of the advantage that we can garner from this in the future.
Right. Oh, well, Dr. Waje talked about human capital development, and of course, he did mention the role of education, the education system, in actually impacting all of this. You are in that, sector. How can the education system actually, bring about this ecosystem and ICT development?
It's a shame that we're limited by time, because it's a subject that can take us 5 hours. But let's see what we can manage in a few minutes. He talked about the NYSC scheme. I'd like to finish with that conversation, but let me say one of the problems that we deal with when we talk about education is that there's an obsession with tertiary education in Nigeria. We focus on the universities and all the problems of the universities. What happens when garbage goes in, garbage will come out? We should really be focusing on primary education. Absolutely. On the primary education area, which is when young people are most impressionable, that's when they learn very fast. We've not paid as much attention as we should pay to that level of education. In fact, one of the things that we're trying to do at the CVL is to create model primary schools. A peculiarity of these model primary schools that we're trying to create is that they will be free of charge. There will be food given to those who attend it, but they are for the children of the ultra poor. So part of the revolution that can come out of what we're trying to do, and we're working with some people out of India on this, is that 20 years from now, the best prepared people might be children of the poorest of the poor from this initiative that we're trying to start. And the first set of these schools are already on the way. We even have a trainer from India who's already here to begin to work. But we'll create these kinds of primary schools to show, first of all, create quality education, teach these young people values, real values. Because there's a collapse of culture in Nigeria, and that's why we're in the mess we are. Give young people the kind of values that will enable them stand out in the world and know that you can say no to a bribe. Teach young people to be scornful of the kind of people who run Nigeria today and their values, and they can go out in the world and build a new society. So primary education is a good starting point. When we come to tertiary education, which is, of course, critical, like he was saying, most of what we know as ICT today started in university dorms. The whole of Silicon Valley is just an outgrowth from Stanford, literally speaking. Sure. And all the great companies, the Googles and all of those, were conversations that took place between graduate students in universities, and we have global companies that have come. If you just think of how much damage politics does to Nigeria, several years ago, we tried to do same thing in Delta State. Cooperation from Apple, from a number of people. We're going to set up essentially a center where we will train young people and a park around it because of local politics. The government of Delta State actually killed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not talking politics here. We're not talking politics here, Professor.
This is long ago, and it had nothing to do with partisan politics. I'm just saying that generally speaking, in our country, because the system does not understand the power of institutions, you'll see that your biggest threat to progress can be your government, because individuals are playing small games. This is not in my neighborhood. This is not from my village. That's the kind of politics I'm talking about.
Looking at the whole thing, and of course, it's important to have a workable policy and framework if a desired ecosystem in ICT development must be achieved. So what kind of policy or framework are you aspiring to see? Dr. Owaje, I mean, you are...
Really, we have a very good policy document, and of course, it's been reviewed now by Her Excellency Dr. Mobola Johnson. And that document is good to go. It's a framework that we can use. But then, when you put pen to paper and translate into action, you're asking yourself, how do we create, strategies out of the policy that are workable? Where are the incubators that has to be, the forerunners of the thinking platform for development of this? Where are the labs where these kids can? Now, when you talk about the policy, as Professor have said, now you have to focus them in sectorial development. So, and you have these kids who are there, who are impressionable, who can do a lot of things. My travel to Cambridge 2 months ago, we had a lecture of future cities, and we had a 13-year-old with 11-year-old supporter coming to present a paper on the world in 2050. I mean, this is about technology, and they're giving the proof of concept. That's the way we want Nigerians to come and stand tall on the stage and do them. And it's not a rocket science. It's about creating that domain that they can be impressed of. You're talking about building future schools like you have in Singapore, where you don't have any class. You have a rotary where you have robotics, biology, chemistry, everybody's rotating. And by the time you filter them out after 4 or 5 years, then of course you are having the creme de la creme of what knowledge can do and what innovation can do. So, parting short is that ICT is a sine qua non on how Nigeria can develop.
Right, and for you, Professor, as a professor of economics and looking at the trend of ICT development and usage in Nigeria, where do you foresee the Nigerian economy in the next 2 years?
Well, it's really a matter of how leadership is offered in that sector, just about any sector. Again, the set of values in leadership is about leadership. You know, leadership shapes culture, and culture shapes human progress. And that's why on the 26th of September, we're having this big celebration of the ICT sector, so that they can show what has brought them leadership and how that can change the system. So that's really what it's about. How do we get leadership to emerge that will show the right direction? Because you don't have leadership, you'll go the wrong way. Look, in the 1960s, a commission on higher education set up by the Balewa government, led by a professor from Oxford, Eric Ashby, said the quality of higher education in Nigeria was as good as the very best in the world, and noted that it was harder to enter the University of Ibadan at that time than to get into Harvard. Can we say that today? It's a function of leadership in the education sector. Absolutely. And that's why we want to reinforce leadership in making sectors work.
Right, thank you very much, Professor. And thank you, Dr. Owaje.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for channels. I always say on this table, each time I come in here, I wish channels will have become the NTA of Nigeria. Yeah,
well, we're already there, and we're better. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program. Well, I've been speaking with Professor Pat Utomi. He's a professor of economics and the founder, Center for Value Leadership. And of course, Dr. Chris Uwaje, Chairman, Mobile Software Solutions. And we'll be looking at the best way to actually create a sustainable ecosystem for economic growth. And one point to take out there is the need to foster education and bring together human capital development and then create local content in our system. Well, that's where we will draw the curtain on today's edition of the program. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Do remember to join us again, same time tomorrow. I'm Chimizi Obiwagu.